Hello, today I'm going to talk about the era of Napoleon Bonaparte. And first of all, I would like to start with how he's going to get into power. So we've been talking about French Revolution, that the third stage was the period of Directory. This is the period that's basis on the Constitution of 1795 that created like a stable government in France that had two like main branches. First of all, we have the two-house legislature, and we have the executive body of 5 men or 5 directors. That's why we call it directory. And in 1795, Napoleon is going to have a chance to become famous. Um, there was a protest of royalists outside of National Convention, and it seemed like the spirits were high and they were like a threat to the parliamentaries. So Napoleon was leading the troops that are going to disperse this protest, and by this he's going to save the parliament. As the result, he's going to be appointed the next year as the leader of the French army. And 3 more years later, he's going to make a bloodless coup d'etat when he's going to take the power. Basically, he's going to force the government to surrender the power to himself under the threat of use of force. So in 1799, he's going to become the Council of France, and France was already at war with most European nations. We have the second coalition fighting against France that included Russia, Great Britain, Austria, Ottoman Empire, Portugal, Naples, and Vatican City. And in order to make his government legitimate, Napoleon is going to make a plebiscite. Plebiscite is like a popular vote to approve the new constitution that was making him the leader of France. And the people of France, they accepted this and they voted in favor of Napoleon's constitution. But France is not going to remain republic for a long period of time. It's going to take him just 4 more years until Napoleon is going to decide that he wanted something more, that he wanted to have a complete monarchical powers. So in 1804, he's going to crown himself as the Emperor of France. As you may see on this painting, he holds the crown in his hands. By this, he is representing that he, not the Pope, not the Church, not the God, has the real power, but he, Napoleon Bonaparte, has the crown, and he is the one who got the power and the decision. So talking about things that Napoleon is going to do, in 1804 also he's going to make a famous Napoleonic Code that is going to be like the representation of his reforms. But I'm going to go more detailed in each one of the aspects that he's going to refer. So first of all, the French Revolution is going to create problems with the Catholic Church. Maybe you remember, but they decided to sell the lands of the church in order to pay the debt. And of course, this created a conflict. So Napoleon needed to do something to solve this conflict. So as a result, he's going to sign a religious settlement known as Concord or Concordat in 1801. That is going to be agreement with the Pope that is going to set like the end to the trouble between the Catholic Church and the government of France. So what Napoleon is going to do, he's going to recognize that the Catholic faith is the faith of the majority of the people of France, and it's like one of the most important faiths on its territory. But he is also going to allow Protestants to exist. They are going to be allowed, and these are going to be like the two main branches of religion that are going to be allowed in France. But either way, we already may talk about certain degree of religious tolerance. Also, he's going to make it the clergy will be paid as state officials, um, and the government, as the result, is going to be above the church. The government is more important than the church. No longer it's the Pope who decides the French government. From now on, it's the government of France who is going to decide um, the appointment um, of bishops, um, but like the local priests are going to be appointed by the church itself, but like the higher positions will be appointed by the French government. Another moment very important of Napoleonic reforms, it's of course the economic management. And as you know, during the period of time of Louis XVI, the French economy was at crisis. There was like very high taxes, the taxation was unequal. Also, the prices of bread were getting higher and higher, and people had nothing to eat, etc., etc. So Napoleon is going to be very efficient in reforming French economy. First of all, he's going to set up a central bank or Bank of France. In most of countries, we still have like central banks. Like in Mexico, it's called Banxico, Banco de Mexico, and this central bank is going to control the money. It's going to control the prices and the supply of food. As a result, the population is going to be much more content, and the currency and the economy is going to get stabilized, and the economy is going to grow thanks to the investments and loans and the more fair tax codes. And finally, in terms of government, we have very important advances. First of all, the government is going to get centralized in the hands of Napoleon through a system of officials who are going to serve him. But what he's going to do is that is he's going to assign those officials by merit. It's no longer buying and selling governmental positions, but now on only the best, the most capable, and the most educated officials are the ones that are going to get into the correct position. Just imagine how much more efficient and better the government is going to become thanks to this meritocracy. Also, he's going to fire corrupt officials. He's going to fire like everyone who was not doing his job well. And in order to get good officials, he's going to promote education, which is a very wonderful thing. He's going to set up a system of lycées, or the secondary schools, designed like to train the future administrators of France. But also he is going um, to promote the education like in local or in church schools that is going to be available for most people, including women, are going to get access to education. What are the negative aspects of his reforms? Well, the freedom of speech is going to get abolished. Napoleon wanted not to hear any criticism of himself or his government. And also we have the restoration of slavery in French colonies, that like slavery is going to be um, once again used on these territories. So this is 1804. So Napoleon is going to continue his conquests and his reforms, and by 1812 he is going to conquer most of European territory. As you may see, this brown color represents most of Europe is going to be somehow conquered by Napoleon Bonaparte, and this is like one of the highest extensions of his enormous Napoleonic empire. Not all of the governments are going to be directly conquered, but some of them are going to unite in order to avoid being conquered, but one way or another, Napoleon is going to have the control. So how is it possible that such a successful man is going to get defeated? I have for you three causes of Napoleon's defeat. So let's start with the first one. And the first cause of the defeat of Napoleon Bonaparte was the continental blockade. Since Napoleon couldn't defeat Great Britain in the seas, he decided that instead he's going to impose a blockade preventing all trade between Great Britain and the continental Europe in order to destroy the economy of the British. He's going to forcibly close the ports of France and to prevent all possible trade. The problem is that such a blockade, instead of benefiting France, is going to affect negatively the economy of France and the European countries, and meanwhile British are going to dominate the seas, and they're going to continue having economic progress. So first cause of Napoleonic's defeat, it's the continental or British blockade. The second one, it's the war in Spain. You will say, how is this possible? He defeated Spain. Yes, he did. He defeated Spain, and he set his brother Joseph as the new king of Spain. The problem is that Spanish really didn't like Joseph. And for example, there was this point of religious. Spaniards were super religious at this moment, and the French, they were quite not religious, not so following. So as a result, they saw the religious traditions of Spaniards as like some kind of barbarian, and they were very disrespectful. As a result, the Spanish often going to feel offended by those French, and they're going to continuously rebel against them. So as a result of the Peninsula War, we have growth of nationalism, most importantly Spain, but in other parts, also the mistreatment of the French troops is going to stimulate the growth of nationalism, like for example in Germany and in some Italian states. And finally, the third and the most important, maybe, of course, cause of the defeat of Napoleon is the invasion of Russia. Never invade Russia, right? So in 1812, Napoleon is going to decide that he's going to finally invade Russia, and he's going to send a huge army of 1 million soldiers into the territory of Russia. Obviously, Russian army was not capable to stop Napoleonic's advance. So as a result, they decided that instead of like fighting openly, they are going to destroy and leave nothing to Napoleon. They're going to destroy the grain fields, livestock, etc., etc. And eventually, they're going to burn the capital city, Moscow. So when Napoleon is going to arrive to the capital, there's going to be nothing there left to him. He's going to stay there for several months, expecting that the Russian Tsar is going to come out and accept his defeat. This is not going to happen. Instead, the winter is going to come, and he's going to get locked in deep inside of the Russian territory without supplies, with very harsh climate, and his retreat is going to be completely disastrous. He's going to lose about 500,000 soldiers, or like 500,000 of people are going to die during his retreat from the Russian territory, and eventually Russia is going to win and defeat Napoleon. So talking about the last days of Napoleon, you already know from the movie it's called the Count of Monte Cristo, that Napoleon had returned after he was defeated. He's going to give up his throne, and then he's going to return for 100 days until he's going to be finally defeated in the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. So after the Napoleonic defeat, there was a great question. So what is going to happen? Are those changes that he caused in Europe going to stay, or should they be like reverted? Napoleon, even though not always he was following those ideas, but he represents the liberal ideology. He represents the liberal ideas. So the people who are going to defeat him, they are going to represent the conservative ideology. So we talk about the conservative reaction of the Congress of Vienna. Congress of Vienna was this event that is going to last more than a year, and where all the most like top of the cream, the richest, the most intelligent, the best people of Europe are going to gather together in this wonderful city of Vienna in Austria, like the center of one of the most prosperous empires. And the main figures of this Congress are going to be Clemens von Metternich, who was the Austrian prince, Friedrich William from Prussia, Tsar Alexander I from Russia, Francis I from Austria, and of course the foreign ministers of Great Britain and France. But the main character who is going to affect most of the decisions made during this Congress was of course Clemens von Metternich, and you have to know him. So what is that Metternich wanted to achieve with this Congress of Vienna? So here are the goals of the Metternich. So first of all, he wanted to prevent any future French aggression. He wanted to create a certain balance of power. This means that none of the countries is going to be too big, none of them are going to be too small, but everything is going to get balanced to avoid future wars and to avoid confrontation, because the idea is like if one country is too big, it will easily conquer the nearby neighbors. And the last thing, of course, he wanted to restore. What are we restoring? The monarchical, traditional, conservative regimes. So the monarchies all over Europe, in those countries that were conquered by Napoleon, they're going to be restored. And even they're going to create a holy alliance. The Holy Alliance means that if one country is going to suffer something that horrible like the Liberal Revolution or the French Revolution, the other countries that form this alliance, they're going to come to help the king or the czar of this country to fight against the rebels. So obviously, we have the most prosperous empires, Russia, Prussia, and Austria, who are going to form this alliance. So what are the consequences of the Congress of Vienna? Well, it's going to be a triumph of the conservatives. We have the conservative restoration all over the European countries. But also we have some positive aspects. The balance of power of Metternich is going to create a lasting peace for a long, well, for like about 50 years there will be no wars, or at least no big wars in Europe. Uh, and the second point is the growth of nationalism. Most of those conservative regimes, they are going to be very oppressive with their people, and as a result, like the local groups, they are going to start raising their voices against those governments. So very briefly, this is like the presentation about the time of Napoleon Bonaparte.